The concept of a super soldier is something humanity has been seeking out for quite some time. If there's one thing we love doing, it's taking out one another more efficiently. Now, this isn't just because, oh, well, you believe something different, so I have to. Sometimes there are really just douche canoes out there that the entire planet hates. But all throughout human history have been stories about one person being exceptional in some way, doing things and accomplishing feats the average person just would not be able to pull off. We were so sure we had all the answers in World War II when we just straight up started giving people accelerants, so that was crazy. But what does this actually mean as far as creating a super soldier? In the events of Universal Soldier, the US military is actually engaging in, I guess, what could be considered a semi-ethical practice, which is pretty interesting. Anyways, as a soldier is taken out for one reason or another, they are selected seemingly at random and then pushed into this program. Revived and enhanced, their tissue is restored somewhat as they are now deployed. Capable of incredible speeds and strength, if, maybe lacking in the brain department a little bit, they carry out the orders of the higher-ups. However, they have one major flaw in them that is self-limiting. So in today's episode, let's talk about the hypothetical ability to revive those who have passed, how they are enhanced, and why they end up succumbing unless given the white goo. Yes, it's as weird as it sounds. We kick off today's story with Pegasus running right at you, trampling you. Big F's in the chat. By far, one of the more stupid jokes I've made on this channel. It's the 90s, which means Vietnam was only 23 years prior because this movie came out in 1992. By now, it's been let's see here. I think it's been 57 years. Lord. That's wild. Anyhow, we are in Vietnam, and bros are straight up not having a good time. As one soldier then leaves Bubba behind, he gets grabbed and told to calm down, as Van Damme over here is told everyone is gone, and then he's blown up too. Ouchies. Moving through the jungle, it's not looking great for the whole platoon. They had a stick and a rock, and they had to share the rock, and it just wasn't enough. Moving into a small village, War Never Changes brother, and hearing music playing, one guy is stringing together ears and the worst necklace I've ever seen. May have lost it there, man. Sarge's question as to what just happened. The village was cleared, and apparently the soldier is informed that they backstab. Drago then informs Van Damme that nobody would listen to him, which is why he's piecing together these ears. Psych evaluation time! Drago then asks if he's a traitor too, as a freak out ensues. Drago then domes the girl's dad. As Van Damme gets blasted in the leg, Drago then trick shots a nade, taking out the girl. Stabbing Sergeant Slaughter here in the guts and then blow one another away like idiots, and that's all they wrote for these two. Except not really, because otherwise this whole movie wouldn't exist. Jumping over to a helicopter, Drago's then checked, as they say this whole thing is gonna just register them as MIA. So get this, right? The guy who's wearing a necklace made of ears. Well, assuming they're going to revive this guy, if I'm to believe this whole movie's premise. But yeah, maybe don't bring back the dude who clearly has severe mental issues, is all I'm saying. Just seems a little eerie to do. But I guess I'd have to ask, why would they listen to me at all? I'm sure Ivan Drago's ears would be burning if you could hear me talking. Okay, this is the content you come for here, by the way. Anyways, they zip up the body bags. Both are now placed on double secret super probation and whisked away to the wonderful world of crackpot science. Packing them in ice, we get Universal Soldier. Welcome to the Nevada desert. As we watch a plane struggle against some pretty sizable wind shear, it then lands as everyone is jazzed enough to pull directly in front of a landing plane. Opening that bad boy up, a transport vehicle now leaves, as the next question was there any reason for them to actually come out there with them? Inquiring minds wish to know. Yes, a helicopter now lands too. Any more military tech that we need out here? As soldier status then exits the craft, the Universal Soldiers have been brought back to life. Which, cool glasses, I guess, except I have cooler glasses. That's right, sponsor time. Well, first episode is sponsored by VITURE, specifically the glasses The Beast. What are these exactly? Well, if you're like me, you've probably been living under a rock because technology has been steadily refined. The Beast are glasses that you can game on, watch movies, check your stock portfolio if for some reason you want to do that. The glasses can be directly connected to any USB-C device or HDMI devices through VITURE's mobile dock. You can see a 1200p screen, which is 4K, on an actual 174-inch screen at 4 meters in heathen units, or in the based Lord's units 13.4 feet away. I have 2015 vision, casual brag, so I don't need the corrective lenses to utilize the Beast. However, you might not, which there actually are glasses with corrective lenses that come with it, so you can actually enjoy a non-blurry experience. It works with gaming consoles, Mac and PC, Steam Decks, Wii, Android, Apple, cloud gaming, whatever you want to hook it up to, you can view on the Beast. and it comes with your own controller that you can use for said computers. I used this the other day to actually play Helldivers 2, and I gotta tell you, it was actually crystal clear. There are settings as well to make the screen stable and anchored, or maybe if you get motion sickness, you can have the screen kind of move more slowly when it comes to you, so it's like not disruptive to your sense of balance. But Roanoke, what of the latency? Well, it's ultra low latency Vision Pair 3 DOF built in, which means it's a premium XR experience, which is exclusive to VITURE. But, you know, I was just kind of thinking about this. Actually, consider this just an idea. Let's say, like, as long as you have power, let's say you go car camping or something, or you're at the airport, or, you know, you're afraid of flying like I am. Well, you can just kind of sit there and then use it to watch movies, play games, whatever you want, which is, I don't know, it's really kind of cool. Car trips, anything like that. It's pretty sweet. So there's a lot of applications for this thing. So go to VITURE's home store and use my code Roanoke for 10% off. Anyways, told you they were cooler glasses. Also, I just want to point out, would it have been cool to actually see this happening? The actual process of repairing soldiers whose insides were Swiss cheese. I guess we could use the image from, or not image, but video from like when they bring back Commander Shepard in Mass Effect 2, but Anyways, I don't make the rules here. Jumping over to the Hoover Dam, terrorists have taken the dam, as in they jump into the reservoir. One woman honks her horn as she arrives. She's the media. Absolute bummer that she's here. Also, quick question, why are there so many people at a dam? That is, I mean, I know the Hoover Dam gets, like, people that come over, but, like, this many? I don't know. As the Universal Soldier begins crawling up the side of the dam, the soldiers are 8 seconds behind schedule. They covered 1.5 miles in 4 minutes. That's pretty good. I did a half marathon on Sunday, and my watch informs me how, like, recovered I am. Let's see. Monday, I was 1% recovered. Today, I'm 7% recovered. At this rate, by the time I'm 92, I should be fully recovered. Descending, Drago then takes aim as they only are given handhelds, but they're really good shots, I guess, as Van Damme is also on the dam. Taking out their targets, they continue their takedowns, descending down the side of the dam. Watching a camera feed, it's all neck snaps and face crunches. Van Damme then spots Drago across the way, but it's cool, they're friends now. No, they're not, they're co-workers anyways. Putting on a mechanic's uniform, one soldier then gets shot up, but I guess it doesn't matter, as then he domes the other guy at the end of the hallway. The other two then are taken out as Van Damme starts having Vietnam flashbacks to the jungle. You're never too young to have a Vietnam flashback. Yeah, the hippocampus also is undefeated in the parking lot if you weren't aware. Remembering these events, he begins to ignore orders as he sees Drago. Turning around and looking at him, he's totally not jazzed about the situation. Okay, so out of all this secret information going on here, right, the General Loose Lips over here literally calls them Universal Soldiers. And I heard somebody call him a lieutenant, right? And given some captains that I know, I feel like they would not entrust a lieutenant with this type of information or procedure. Also, again, later they call him colonel, and IMDb also has labeled him as colonel. So why did they call him a lieutenant earlier? Just saying. Anyways, turning back to the Universal Spa room for the Universal Soldiers, they talk about how Van Damme froze up. They ask him why he didn't respond, as he responds, innocent. In doing so, Drago then wakes up looking at him because he mentions the village. Yeah, you literally have the brain still alive. Anyways, shutting down the dream team here, they all go to sleep. Meanwhile, investigative journalist goes to get information that she needs. Van Damme is told he was confused and he must follow orders, which he agrees. Meanwhile, the soldier from earlier who got lit up is on ice. They spend millions, if not billions, to revive these guys, and then they give them the directive like, okay, you're gonna go in, you're gonna get shot, and then you're gonna pretend like you're dead. It's a beautiful plan. The team will be gone within 7 missions at this rate. Honestly, not the dumbest thing our tax dollars have ever been used on. Whoa, that's topical. As investigative journalist then takes photos, he wakes up and scares the holy hell out of her. She then runs off, which again, it's kind of interesting that there are like no fences or guards or really anything. Like a barbed wire fence at minimum, maybe. No? Alright then. Baby Driver then goes to take off as he immediately crashes the car. Who gave this man the wheel? Van Damme then finds them first as he drags her out along with Drago. They ask to speak to someone in charge, as the Universal Soldiers are told to bring them back to the base after finding the film. Baby Driver then gets domed as this activates Van Damme's almonds as he smashes Drago in the face. He then takes off with her as he's given orders to stop the car. Telling him to turn the car around, he then tells her she's confused, taking off his virtual boy. Also, I have subtitles on now, and they do call this guy a colonel, by the way. Again, I know for a fact they called him a lieutenant earlier. Whatever. Anyways, so now that the virtual boy has been dropped, apparently that was the thing that was directing him the whole time, Drago then calls him a traitor as investigative journalist crashes out. The scientist then yells at the colonel about telling the truth, as one of the scientists says he doesn't want to be a part of it. Too late. You already created these abominations of nature. They're your problem now. Van Damme then says his tour is up, as he just wants to go home. Vanny Boy then sears his wounds because he got shot. Steak, as the bleeding has now stopped. Meanwhile, Be All You Can Be then takes the biggest, largest, most inconspicuous vehicle possible that they can come up with to chase the absolutely goated 77 Chevy Blazer, by the way, which runs out of fuel later on, which is pretty on brand. But, you know, why is it on brand, you may be asking? Well, I'm glad you asked that, and not me assuming you asked that. Now, the 77 Blazer typically came with either a 250, 305, 350, which is the GigaChat engine, or a 400. However, these bad boys did only get to around like 180 horsepower at the max, and at the lower end, around 145 horsepower. They got around 8 to 12 miles per gallon, which back then isn't a big deal, but now that would be horrific. In fact, the meta associated with that, given that the 350 is actually the platform that the LS3 is based on, you just LS3 swap that bad boy, 435 horsepower, possibly around 20 miles per gallon. If these Chevy Blazers could sing. Also, headcanon says this is a 4x4, so with a lift and those engines, even though those tires are tiny, that could reduce the range to like 5 to 8 miles per gallon. This, Ford Bronco, and 4Runner or Land Cruiser are the absolute goats of off-roading. So Van Damme gets out and starts pushing the car up to 30 miles per hour, which, I mean, this guy is technically still made of meat because your cells are going to run out of ATP at a certain point. He's sweating, so clearly he does have a metabolism, and we will actually discuss this later because it sort of makes sense, but it's heavily reliant on his ability to heal, which even then, there are other issues such as genomic stability, and it needs to be understood that there is mechanical scaffolding, I think, in the body. Anyway, so investigative journalist goes to make a call at this point as Van Damme heads into the gas station. They apparently ran out of gas yesterday, as Van Damme needs to cool down, telling him about the waterbeds. Those were such a ridiculous invention. Lumbar issues for life. Selling a room to them, Van Damme then heads out with her as she flips on the news. Finding an AC unit, Drago has donned the Virtual Boy once more as he goes looking for Van Damme, as then he blows out the phone lines. Unfortunately, this is the 90s, and we have to see, like, male ass for some reason. I never needed to see Van Damme's butt, but there you go. Van Damme then says he has to cool down as he collapses. He needs ice. Meanwhile, Dream Team is making their way down the road, putting Van Damme on ice. His wound immediately begins to heal. Sick, bro. Super healing abilities. She's concerned more about that than Broham being shot and not even caring about it. Which, okay. Meanwhile, Dream Team has located investigative journalists. They tell Drago to wait until they are together as Van Damme then tests out the waterbed. Again, not very comfortable. Seeing Nixon talks about, like, Vietnam and everything, Van Damme then starts having flashbacks. Dream Team now finds the Chevy as they go to light up the entire building. Ducking, Van Damme then starts breaking through walls. Of course, if you freeze frame this when he breaks through the first wall, who is that guy? That is not Van Damme. Van Damme clearly does not do his own stunts. A couple is in there who apparently didn't hit the deck when a ton of lead was being blasted out front. And you know, for super soldiers, I feel like it would make more sense for them to break in and actually identify their target rather than just blowing everything up. Master Chief would never. The last wall is concrete, so he gets stuck because he can't break through it. Master Chief would never. Dream Team then moves in now as they just kind of take the shoot first, think later, or possibly even never approach. And then they just kind of lose him, hiding with a couple under the sheets. Master Chief, actually, you know what? Given the situation and the luck involved, that they just kind of move on and don't maybe pull back the blanket, Master Chief might. Anyway, so then they take the guy's keys and head out, which, dude, nice car. 1956 Buick Special Riviera, I believe. Can't say it's my exact flavor of car, but I can appreciate the appreciation for them and those who restore them, because once they're gone forever. Yeah, you could technically reproduce them-ish, but it's never going to be the same. So, losing Van Damme and investigative journalists, good job, super soldiers. The colonel and or lieutenant, whatever he is, now arrives, finding the bags of ice and the missing kidney. Van Damme then tells her to buckle up, which she says, nay. I mean, brother, to be real, those things are screaming metal death traps anyways, so. She starts investigating him and asking who he is. Wow, you're being interviewed by the media, hooray. Stopping the car, she asks him if he has a family, as he says, well, I don't really know. Oh, good. The biggest vehicle also is just behind them. It's been following the whole way. Again, luckily they took the most inconspicuous vehicle. Stopping at another gas station, they head inside as Van Damme tells the gas station owner to park the car. Stripping nude again for reasons unknown, he says he must have a tracker on him and to look for something unusual. My God, he has an antenna. Looking down, she found something on the back of his leg, stabbing himself. He then goes to cut it out as she goes in for the tracker. See, that is why you put trackers in the skull. They can't cut it out. Also, I don't know why he couldn't just pull it out of his own leg he just did this weird thing where he looked through his like own legs maneuver. Surely he could have ripped it out with his hands. So as the ridiculous mecha mobilization vehicle rolls up, they scan the area when they really could have just looked outside and seen what they needed. Better to scan it, I guess, heading to the building where surgery was taking place, and then bust in and light it up, which blows up the whole gas station. Again, these are really dumb super soldiers. Because they were lit on fire, they have now overheated. Van Damme, meanwhile, was hiding in the ice in the trunk as they enter this ridiculous vehicle. They grab some sort of files on the himself, I guess, as the owner then locks himself in the trunk, which, yes, you have ice in there to keep you cool now. However, I'm pretty sure this guy just sealed his fate. Like, that ice is gonna run out. Also, I want to point something else out. You guys remember, like, okay, this is really stupid, and it has nothing to do with anything, but you remember in Until Dawn, like the video game? Remember at one point when you're playing as that one woman that nobody likes? She's, like, kind of mean. Anyways, and like you're with one guy, and you can either hide in the freezer or continue to hide around the pillar, but you're like, you know what, I'm going to go to the freezer. Why is it when the game ended she froze to death, when that guy clearly knew you were in the freezer and he was hiding next to the door, and he could have just let you out? I have no idea, but this just Jimmy Neutron brain blasted me with that massive plot hole. Anyways, so they take off in the screaming metal death trap once more as the Colonel watches this unfold. Drago was in the back, though, as he starts choking Van Damme, which, do they even really need to breathe? I don't think they do. Anyways, hitting a rock, Drago wasn't wearing a seatbelt as he exits the windshield. The Colonel tells GR-13 the mission is over, as Drago says his name is Sergeant Andrew Scott, and I need an ear necklace. No, it's Drago. As in, he domes the Colonel. Whoa, insubordination. Get that Colonel on ice and give him a Virtual Boy. Looks like getting his head smashed fixed the issue, I suppose, but stealing the Colonel's ears, Drago's then ordered back into the cooling container, which he refuses. So, gee, you mean the guy who was wearing a necklace made of ears wasn't just like a mega cool man to bring back from the dead? Who would have guessed? As the other scientists keep working on the other super soldiers, I mean, you have all, I guess, the guys you need there to maybe bring down Drago, but given he's the sergeant, we're going to learn later they listen to him exclusively. Over at the diner, Van Damme is interviewed some more about the names, and he asks if she can help him, as then he asks why she's doing all this for him. She straight up says, well, I mean, it's not really for you, it's for my career. Oof. She then leaves to go check out a lead while he waits for the specials. Watching others eat, he then goes to eat too. Meanwhile, back at Alpha RV-1, Drago is making more ear necklaces as they tell him he's beginning to run hot. It's nap time. Time to go night-night. So the scientists develop a plan. They're going to quadruple the serum, but when the signal is given, they will increase the pressure, which is supposed to do, I guess, blood is brainstem. I don't know. So as he goes to check the injection device, Drago then stabs him through the head with the needle, which takes him out instead. Great plan, guys. This is why scientists are not tasked with logistics. Meanwhile, Van Damme keeps ordering specials. The waitress then asks if he has enough money to pay for all this. Well, you've kind of been rude the whole time, so I'm going to be real with you. I wouldn't answer either. I would just kind of look at her and be like, maybe I do, maybe I don't. Bring me another special. The cook then comes out as it turns into a diner fight, and why everyone is jumping in to fight the guy that is clearly just beating wholesale ass is beyond me. Over in Utah now, because why not, the compensator shows up once more with Drago approaching the group. Everyone here makes fun of him as then he goes for the triple kick. Very rare. Meanwhile, last remaining, I'm with the science team, then hands over a grenade to another super soldier, and he tells him to just hold it for 30 seconds and then drop it, which I'm not 100% sure why he did this, if I'm being honest with you. I suppose the scientist noped out of that vehicle, but I can't be sure. He just sort of never comes back up, if I remember correctly. Drago then steals one guy's belt out there, as Drago then heads to the freezer with the boys. Over in Clinton, Utah, they then head to the Veterans Hospital, and approaching and heading inside, I don't know why, they're like, hey, is, I don't know, Colonel Mad Scientist here? This woman was so suspicious of them. Like, they just look like normal people. Anyways, as Van Damme then looks out the window, he sees one guy as he remembers waking up in the hospital. As he does, we jump all the way back to his childhood, which is not really important at all, as Drago is crashing out as his boys are not quite cool enough to stand up. Drago then tells everyone to shop smart, shop S-smart. You got that? As grocery store security now shows up and they get immediately domed. Send some widows to their flowers. Yes, that's what I meant to say. Back over at the Veterans Hospital, we finally get an actual explanation for these soldiers. By hyper-accelerating their bodies, they discovered they could turn deceased tissue into living tissue, but it causes their bodies to run extremely hot. What does hyper-accelerating mean? Well, we'll kind of get there in the science section. and we'll try to figure it out, but they need to be cooled and the brain needs to be sedated so that they don't remember the bad times in Vietnam. Turning on the news, the grocery security situation has basically gotten out, and their last emotion apparently is what they are living in basically as a super soldier and kind of what they're getting stuck in if they're awake for too long. For Van Damme, it was going home. For Drago, it was fighting the insurgents. He doesn't realize he's not even alive. Well, in the traditional sense. The investigative journalist then tells Van Damme he needs to go to the hospital as he says, I'm already dead, so it doesn't matter. I feel like they were going for some like serious Terminator vibes here, I believe. Is very interesting. So handing her a bus ticket, he then tells her to go to Los Angeles, sending her to her doom. Also, where did you get the money for that bus ticket? Just saying. He then heads off, which honestly, I mean, she's not even that big of a character in this anyhow. I don't really know if her presence has made a difference in anything, but she decides not to get on the bus as the cops light her up. No, they don't. Anyways, being transported somewhere on a bus, bro is a little too warm. Oh, good. Teaching Japanese communities about American RVs has finally arrived for the compensator. Also, why are the cops here in the first place? How did they know? Drago then rams the police bus as then he lights up the whole thing. The officer gets domed as Drago then tells him to check on the driver as he doesn't look so hot. Okay, so they can antagonize you. Good. Drago then throws a grenade in there as investigative journalist keeps dumping them out. Van Damme gets a hold of the bus as somehow they now end up on a cliff's edge even though they were just in salt flats. Don't think those things are really that close to one another. How does this happen exactly? I don't know. Universal landscape. Going to jump, he then pushes out the investigative journalist as the bus then flips. Going to knock him off a cliff's edge, Van Damme then takes out the driver of the compensator as this sends Drago and him careening over the edge. Van Damme gets up looking like he had one too many as the cops then tell them to freeze. Well, cops is a generous term. More like a cop. She's able to knock him out somehow as then they go to steal the keys. I'm not 100% certain why they were arrested in the first place. I'm assuming it's the diner fight. Exiting that area, they now head to Louisiana, which is where Van Damme lived. It's got to be like 1,000 degrees out there as his mom comes out and she's like, oh my god, it's Van Damme, you haven't aged. Even though you're technically 50, you still look like you're in your 20s. Anyways, that night, Van Damme looks through photos containing himself, as he says there's a lot of things he remembers, but many things that he can't. It's been 25 years, apparently, so they're in the 90s, and now it's starting to downpour because it's Louisiana during the summer. I mean, maybe also inform them of the ice situation before you maybe go so they can keep their Chia pet son alive. Drago now arrives as he cuts power to the house and heading to the kitchen. Everyone's been rounded up as Drago then calls out about how it's a nice farm and warriors come out to play. Blowing up the tractor like a turbo douche, their only livelihood, Van Damme then lock and loads Brides of Christ and goes outside as he immediately puts down the boomstick. Brilliant plan, Van Damme, I guess, as he tries to tell him the war is over. And then he starts punching him, laughing about it like, listen, brother, he's a super soldier too. We all know that hurts you. It's not like a regular human punching a super soldier. This is a super soldier punching a super soldier. Like, it's like when you get punched and you're trying not to cry. That's exactly what's going on right here. Telling him that he should have taken his medication, Drago then injects himself, which does something, I guess. What does it do? I don't know. He then yeets Van Damme as investigative journalist keeps trying to free herself, smashing Van Damme against the car a few times for good measure. Bro is having some issues in this fight. Drago then goes to fire the handheld, but it's empty. Grabbing a grenade, Van Damme tells her to run, but I'll tell ya, Drago is crazy with those nades as Van Damme finally decides to use his freaking legs and kicks him. Also, throwing that grenade, why would you run in a straight line? Zigzag. So getting yeeted once more. Oh no, his parents. More grenade times. Grabbing a syringe, he's able to inject himself as evidently now it's a fair fight. What does the white goo do? Who knows? So turning into some good old-fashioned CQC, Van Damme starts beating the brakes off Drago, launching him through a wall. Van Damme then says he's alive now, apparently, as he super kicks him into some farm equipment. This evidently results in him dying, but just kidding, because it's the 90s. He then grabs him to take out Van Damme as well, as he breaks his arm and instead turns on the wood chipper, which does its job. His parents then hug it out, having survived, as then he goes to check on Shrapnel Blast Girl, who's still down for the count. Laying down with her, she's survived, but given the proximity of the blast, I'm guessing as he's trying to talk to her, all she's hearing is eeeeee. He then mentions how Drago, he's around. Yeah, in the trees, on the ground, in the mulch, as they hug it out. And he's like, I feel like I'm a 50-year-old man. And thus concludes the godsend known as Universal Soldier. Hello and welcome to the science portion. You have made it to the most Chad-like part of the video, and if you click off now, well, you're a huge dork. I don't make the rules, I just worked here. So essentially, I didn't just work here, I do work here currently. What we have here with the Universal Soldiers is really not so much of an issue at this point as to if we can, but the issue is if we really should. Again, the criteria set up for which soldiers they choose to pick to revive is wildly terrible. Given they know the brain may have a blocker, this is sort of like, but yeah guys, the glass is bulletproof, so I armed everyone outside the car and told them I just kicked a baby. We were totally safe though. Seems like a complete and utter bizarre situation to rely that heavily on the thing that's supposed to protect you, rather than just not arming the people outside the car initially. Interesting analogy, but it'll make sense here in a minute. Because except in this case, it's Vietnam soldiers armed with mental trauma of literally biting the dust, which absolutely is going to be imprinted in their last memories and then come back out to play eventually. I mean, at this point, we still knew about combat-associated PTSD. That creates very real and exceedingly strong neural connections in the mind that are difficult to overcome. Which actually, given we know how this process works, if this loop could be targeted, you could actually free people potentially from PTSD attacks. Essentially how it works is the amygdala detects a life-threatening event. Its whole purpose is to help the person remember it by flagging things as important if they are dangerous enough. Something threatening your life really does qualify as dangerous enough. And from here, adrenaline skyrockets and stress hormones follow suit. At this point, emotion is now associated with the memory, as the hippocampus would get involved, as it always does with memory formation, where this high amount of emotion and sense of danger are associated with this memory. Given its traumatic noises, lights, similar situations, they kind of act as the stimulus that will then trigger all of the thoughts and feelings that person had at that point in time where it was necessary, but it no longer is. That is what makes it quite dangerous. Military members have this happen a lot, given that they see things humans in general are not supposed to see, coupled with the emotions associated with what was happening at that point in time. I think it's important to understand that this is not a weakness or that somehow it's a failure on your part. It's a literal survival mechanism the brain has that has been pushed to the absolute maximum, and it has created feedback loops within the brain. If you are struggling currently or you are in crisis associated with that, seeking help is vitally important. There are a plethora of resources with the VA, which, from what I heard, maybe it's not the ultimate favorite group you guys have to deal with, but if you or someone you know is in a life-threatening crisis, you can dial 988 and then press 1 to talk to a real person. There's treatment for this type of threat detection, and it actually aims at weakening those loops. It's more than just talking about your feelings. There are actionable steps that are designed to help the brain turn down those levels of those alarms. So here with the Vietnam soldiers, who would have these loops in their brains, given the hippocampus was still activated shortly before expiring, means that those are just sitting there like landmines waiting for anything to come by and trip them, sending them into like the super soldier frenzy, I guess is the best way to put it. We will talk about that momentarily when we discuss more about the brain and what had to happen to actually save it, but I think what we should talk about first is the meat suit and what happens shortly after you check out and how they're actually able to save it. And I wrote that, and then I'm going to completely lie to you apparently, because I immediately start talking about the brain. Anyways, along with that, augmentations to metabolism and how it has impacted them. Because this is actually more than just throwing in a tracker on the back of the leg and a few mechanical pieces like, oh, congratulations, your elbow is fully mechanical. This is a fundamental overhaul of your biology. Now, interestingly enough, when we bite the big one and take our dirt naps, the reality is our bodies are still very much so alive. When your brain checks out, you have about 4 to 6 minutes naturally before irreversible brain death has crept in and taken away any semblance of you. After that, there's really no point in attempting to bring you back, because what you're really doing is just bringing back the body of the person, but basically the soul is gone, so to speak. Personality is wiped, cognition is donezo, recognition of the world around you out the window. There is nothing of you left because the loops, neural connections, behaviors, sight, again, sense of the world around you, I mean, it's all gone. It's sort of bizarre to think about because it's like your body is sitting there alive, but it's not really you anymore. Brain death, but living body is honestly fairly tragic. The reason this happens, though, is when the brain begins to die, you have something known as calcium flooding. As the ion channels open up due to them relaxing because the brain has run out of ATP to keep the gradient that it needs to depolarize properly, since the ion pumps have basically failed, and given that the neuron's primary goal, besides communication, is to keep calcium out of the cell, or at least tightly controlled, a hypotonic solution has been created within the cell itself. That's right, I'm stealing from Chubby Emu. Hypo meaning lower, and hyper meaning higher, so a lower concentration of solution in the cell versus outside of the cell. This naturally will allow calcium to begin flowing into the cell, and this will cause the cell to release glutamate, which then excites the neuron, allowing more calcium into the cell. From here, the issue is a runaway problem. As calcium continues to enter the cell, it depolarizes and then enters an excitotoxic cascade, which causes proteins to begin behaving differently. Proteases in the neuron will actually start now breaking down the cytoskeleton, along with phospholipase destroying the cell membrane, and endonucleases actually cutting up the DNA. Why they do this? A lot of miscommunication going on. So as the calcium enters the mitochondria, this will actually now produce more reactive oxygen species, or ROS, which further damages the cell. And as at this point, there is a mass die-off of neurons. If you can catch the brain tissue just prior to entering this stage, you have a chance to prevent the damage from occurring. At room temp, this process again begins about 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. In frozen lakes, if you fall in and drown, it could be an hour. Actually, they revived somebody literally that long after they had fallen in. It was kind of crazy. And it's where we actually kind of began to learn that cooling down the body and the brain prevents this from happening for much longer. This is the major issue with revival of a person. But this is because neurons are incredibly sensitive. The body cells are actually not as sensitive. When the body loses the brain, as long as oxygen is still somehow being exchanged in the lungs, or at least there's like enough of it in the bloodstream, it is possible to survive for an extended period of time. Even without oxygen, actually, the heart is known to survive up to 15 minutes in a hypoxic environment, and sometimes up to an hour. The kidneys survived around 30 to 60 minutes, sometimes up to a few hours. The liver is incredibly tolerant, lasting hours without oxygen, and the intestines are a bit more susceptible, especially given the fact that they're right next to bacteria because it's on them, but they're still able to survive for about an hour or so. The muscles are actually like the ultimate survivors. They actually go hours, like way further without oxygen coming their way. So even with brain being damaged or outright gone, the body can continue to live for quite some time. But as the minutes tick by, a very predictable decomposition begins to take hold. Without oxygen, it all comes back to the mitochondria. It will not be able to produce ATP, which I only just now remembered. I didn't tell you earlier what that is. That's adenosine triphosphate. One phosphate gets actually broken off, which then releases energy for the cell to use, making it adenosine triphosphate, or ADP. That is the spent version. So once ATP fails to flood the cells, as it usually does, the cell's function will begin to slow down. They end up switching to anaerobic glycolysis, which is not really a bad thing physically speaking. Like when you work out, for instance, your cells do this all the time, especially your muscle cells, because there's just not enough oxygen to go around. It's just, metabolically speaking, wildly inefficient. And this is actually what produces lactic acid, which is that soreness that you feel. With aerobic respiration using oxygen, 36 to 38 ATP are produced per molecule of glucose. With anaerobic respiration, that's only going to be about, which I mean, it's actually without oxygen, I meant to tell you that part, but only about 2 ATP per molecule are produced. So again, wildly inefficient. Eventually, you just straight up run out of fuel. Fairly rapidly, actually, given how bad this process is. But this leads to the same issue as in the brain. The ion pump begins to fail, and then the cell itself will begin to swell. Calcium begins to rush in, enzymes activate once more, the membranes actually will rupture, which is classified as apoptosis. The same issue as in the brain, it just holds out for a little longer. But what's also interesting, just as a side note, is the brainstem neurons are actually more rugged and, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? More capable than other areas of the brain concerning their neurons. And this is important given what we see with supersoldiers. The brainstem is responsible for a ton of autonomic functions like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate, which your man... I am the storm that is approaching. As well as serving as communication to the rest of your body. But there is a fairly unique type of breathing that actually happens towards the end, and this is called agonal breathing. This breathing is horrifying, as it shows that the oxygen levels have dipped to the point that the conscious mind is out of the game. Instead, the brainstem has fully taken over, trying to get any amount of oxygen that it can into the bloodstream so that it can actually properly perfuse the brain. This gasping sound that people actually make towards the end is the brain's last-ditch attempt to draw in oxygen, but it does not work enough to support the system and will eventually result in the body crashing out anyhow, as those neurons in the brainstem also begin to die off. So then, with all this, what exactly are the supersoldiers? Well, in reality, their tissue should be well beyond the preservation stage, unfortunately. By the looks of it, they got in the night. However, by the time the body bag is zipped up, this has got to be either morning or afternoon. This would mean that they have been in the jungle for several hours. That is not great for even a living person to be in. So then realistically, what are we even looking at here? Well, there are several parameters that would need to be actually filled in order to actually revive someone, and it goes well beyond the idea of just somehow they're restructuring the tissue. The biggest problem here is that the tissue has been lost, like it's gone, melted away or broken down by the bacteria that would be invading the body or was already there. The damaged tissue has no way of being revived in any meaningful way. I mean, how could you really even achieve that unless you reverse the flow of time, which is unlikely to happen as well. So then how is any of this working? Well, the brain is dead as discussed at this point. A lot of body cells are gone as well, but it's very likely that some are at least somewhat viable. Immediately placing the soldier on ice is the best way to prevent any further issues from arising. By freezing them, they are fundamentally locked in this particular state, and nothing can be further operated on to remove the issues. But now comes the real problem: tissue salvage. You are going to have a gradient of cells in the body at this point. Some cells are likely extremely low in ATP, but still functioning. Some are completely out and starting to show issues. Some are heavily damaged, but still kind of holding it together with maybe their membranes not completely ruptured. And others have already like straight up entered apoptosis and exploded, saturating the area. Which then you've got other areas or other issues like cytotoxic material being leaked out, which is also not good. But the key is, it works a lot maybe like triage. Work on the cells that have not passed the point of no return. In doing so, the first thing you would need to correct, given the ion pumps mentioned earlier, is going to be returning energy to the cell. And this is where the combat metabolism comes into play, but it would need to go well beyond just the metabolism, I guess. Once injecting this super soldier serum, there's very likely a cocktail of materials within the actual serum that goes well beyond genetic programming. You're going to need things like pyruvate, NAD plus precursors, mitochondrial membrane stabilizers, enzymes to restart the cell process, given likely the ones that were there initially have denatured, and all this is likely going to have to operate at much lower temperatures and then have a broad range of temps that they can actually exist in so they won't denature, given the body temperatures are going to spike well beyond what would even be considered normal. As this cocktail enters the body, it will fundamentally wake up the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell, by the way. However, from this point, given the lack of oxygen, this would actually sort of be like, if you don't do it correctly, you're just jumping off the battery of a car. If the alternator doesn't work, then nothing is charging the battery anyway, so then it just dies again. You need to replace that oxygen. The mitochondria being the battery and oxygen being the alternator means something needs to change in relation to what's going on. So to this end, the white goo, hypothetically, must then be not only just a sedative, but also it's going to have to contain some sort of dense amount of like liquid oxygen, specifically O2, but also something that is going to counter the production of ROS while the cells were running on fumes. Now, the good thing is these can actually be synthetically created to bind to IRS. I got IRS on the brain. ROS, neutralizing it. But while this is happening, it would need to basically be rewriting the instructions of the mitochondria, or at minimum, replacing the mitochondria entirely. But the question would be, why? Well, several things are happening once the cell functionally wakes back up, so to speak, in an absolute hell state where its entire cytoplasm is basically toxic to itself. First, there is a form of enhanced healing that we have seen. There is super strength, there's also anti-aging, and for all this to happen, the energy reserves of the body would need to be set much higher. And this can either look like mitochondria behaving more efficiently, producing higher amounts of ATP from the same level of nutritional intake. This energy preservation would mean that the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain are much more efficient than what is naturally available to humans, and this may allow for higher levels of ATP, even in anaerobic activity, to actually be produced. And this would allow for the body to have more available energy for mitotic healing as well as activities that would require it, like pushing a Chevy Blazer up to 30 miles per hour for several miles, or even running a mile and a half or swimming a mile and a half inside of 4 minutes, or being able to rapidly heal from wounds, which requires a massive amount of ATP to actually power the mitosis necessary. Now, there needs to be more than just increased energy availability, though. Genetic stability is a major player in this entire process. We know Van Damme and Drago were in their late 20s around the Vietnam era, and by the time that they were turned into super soldiers, they had already entered their 50s. Now, the question is, were they in cryostasis that whole time, or were they simply just, better off genetically because of the serum? There's already many proofreading processes in the nuclear envelope, but the main one is actually going to be DNA polymerase. It will proofread the template strand and then fix any mixed kind of nucleotides, which will then kind of proceed to excise those that are incorrect through the utilization of exonuclease activity. But again, there are several other systems in place, and to name all of them, it would literally sound like a biology textbook. But the systems are mismatch repair, base excision repair, nucleotide excision repair, and also so on and so forth. But you get the idea. If it's broken, there are methods in which your body can repair it. But the major problem with all this is it's not 100% correct. And this is why I'm inclined to believe that the super soldiers have been up and around for quite some time. Given their healing ability and the temperatures that they run at, you're talking about the potential for genetic mutations to build up rapidly due to the demand placed on those cells. This would mean that anything affecting the actual proofreading abilities of the genome is going to need to be altered so that the healing factor with cells dividing that quickly do not just rapidly build up damage. Not to mention, you're talking about the heat. Like, if you want to know why they run so hot, it's been said that it's their metabolism, which, yes, ATP production actually does generate heat. And in this case, if they're producing a ton of ATP, it's going to pretty much produce more heat. But also, cellular division produces heat. Movement of the body produces heat. All of these things, anytime your body does anything, the waste product is pretty much heat. But there's something also known as the Hayflick limit, which is definitely going to be an issue for any super soldier without basically genetic fixes. If you ever wonder why larger animals live longer, it's typically because their metabolisms are going to be slower versus a shrew whose metabolisms I think is like 25 times humans and they live for like a year. This means that their cellular division is also, for bigger animals, not as rapid, and for smaller animals is much more rapid. And the reason is that it becomes heat generation again, right? If you take a mammal, like an elephant, they don't need to generate as much heat because their body actually retains heat. Whereas if you take a shrew, they need to generate more heat, so their metabolism has to be higher. In fact, actually, if you remember Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which is completely unrelated, if you were to shrink yourself down to that size, because you would be so small and the human metabolism is so slow, you would actually freeze to death almost like instantly. It would be crazy. But anyways, the Hayflick limit is literally a limit on how many times a cell can divide, which typically is around 50 to 80 times, at least within mammal populations. But after that, the cell's genetic profile is so damaged, it can no longer properly conduct itself, which then leads to apoptosis. So with the super soldiers, given their age and the physical stressors on their body, if the genetic coding were left up to just standard human proofreading abilities that naturally come with the body, then they would eventually just mutate into a blob of cancer or just have their bodies melt away. Now, internally, apart from things like metabolic ability, there are several enhancements that go beyond just the flesh. You can kind of hear the mechanical parts whirring inside fairly often, which means really at this point, they're more like cyborgs, which kind of helps us to understand why exactly they need all of this energy. It's very likely that these parts are actually tapping in to the nervous system directly linked. Probably, honestly, if I had to call it, it's definitely linked to the spinal cord. But very likely also, the mechanical portions of the body are powered by a battery of sorts. And this battery is likely recharged by the actual body itself through chemical reactions and electrical impulses of cells. This demand on the cells would actually also continue to lead heat to build up in the body, which is why over time, they do need to cool down. And this gives the cells a chance to kind of enter a reduced activity state, but also allow the machine portion of the body time to cool down as well. And without it, the cells would continue to charge the battery for the machine portion of the body, but this, in turn, would cause the cells to reach very likely critical temperatures, which would likely then cook them at a certain point. And you can have all the healing you want in the world, but once certain temperature ranges are reached, protein is going to denature no matter what. But then finally, we have the brain. And this one is kind of a more bizarre situation because it's just really overall going to depend on how exactly the brain is responding. Both Drago and Van Damme have been out for hours. Necrosis of the neurons would have already firmly set in certain areas due to the calcium overload as mentioned earlier. In those minutes to proceeding hours later, the biggest issue that you're going to run into is DNA fragmentation. Some of the neurons will become fragmented, which will completely knock them out of the game, much like with the other cells of the body. However, there is a lining of hope here. The cells that can hold out for those hours at least, while many of the neurons of the brain are going to be absolutely destroyed, some are still stuck in sort of like a pre-necrotic state. They haven't completely been destroyed yet, they're not operational, and maybe in some areas of the brain, such as the hippocampal CA1 area, that actually can survive for days, which is interesting, is it not? The hippocampus being the area that can survive much longer. So when the soldiers are scooped up during this time frame, the process is halted due to the freezing. The same goo given clearly has the ability to actually alter behavior of the genes, and in this case, the mitotic areas have been overhauled, allowing for the healing in the first place, which means it's heavily affecting the cyclin genes. To this end, once the body is restarted, the calcium is then cleared from the neurons, likely using the lymphatic system more often than not, and it's going to still require the ion pumps to work, but those would start clearing out the calcium of any neuron that's even capable of doing it, and then the glymphatic system will wash it away. So this will basically restart some of the neurons. The excited state would still be present, which was Van Damme's freak out when the doctors first arrived him. The minerals and neurochemicals he had not been successfully cleared from the brain yet, and once this process was completed and all neurons that were still viable had been restarted, it's clear the areas that were necrotic would be fully lost, and also as a person, they would still pretty much just be vegetables, but mitosis of the neurons would then take over for an average person. That's going to be incredibly rare. There is some activity that the brain kind of engages in, and there's some activity that the brain really doesn't experience, and this is going to be mitotic healing, as the dangers of mitosis in the skull far outweigh the benefits that may present if it could. Essentially, tumor formation is what I am referencing. Now, with that said, this would have monumental impacts on this person. First, given all the new connections, the brain would be actually wiped clean at this point. Only the strongest memory recall likely remains, which is, you guessed it, PTSD, given how it would be imprinted so staunchly into the brain at this point in time. Other areas, such as older, lesser important memories, would have been lost to the new connections, but spontaneously, much like getting amnesia from being hit in the head, these could return if those connections are reformed, which is known to happen. And also, even some of the PTSD areas are still totally annihilated because basically, Van Damme didn't have access to why he even hated Drago, even though he saw him occasionally. But this perfectly shows why Van Damme keeps having flashbacks to Vietnam. Drago's emotional state of anger and delusion was the last thing that permeated his own brain, which once the connections formed again, the brain went right back to that state. There appears like there was an attempt at preventing this from happening by sedating the brain, when not in combat, or only allowing them conscious abilities for a very limited time frame. But the issue is, while the brain is active, it's going to communicate with itself, and in doing so, it scratches at that wall of amnesia, Sam Winchester style, until it finally breaks through and the memories all come flooding back. More so if they are directly related to the PTSD loop. Now, the major question is, how feasible is this really? Not even remotely. See, the issue is when cells decay and enter apoptosis, they leak out a ton of cytotoxic material into the surrounding area, which is toxic to other cells, which then causes them to explode. The bacteria in your body then eats you, and even if you could somehow restart the body, the brain is simply an organ that you can't just cram a bunch of new cells into and just restart it. Your training, personality, knowledge, it's all going to be gone. You're basically an adult infant at this point with horrifying memories that you couldn't even hope to explain because you don't even know how to talk. You would have to teach super soldiers all the information over again on even how to understand language to begin with. Realistically, while it seems like a cool idea, you're better off taking younglings from families and then, maybe flash cloning somebody else to send back, and then using living participants in order to make these augmentations. Otherwise, this would be like trying to build a skyscraper, but you decide you have to start from the center of the earth, overcoming all of those issues to make it back to the surface, and then building the skyscraper up, when really you could have just poured pylons and foundation a few hundred feet down from the surface and not have to worry about doing all that extra crap. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. This is just one of those movies that I'm like, okay, well, hell yeah, brother. But either way, hopefully you enjoyed the episode. If you did enjoy, then please leave a like and a comment as it helps get the video out there. Otherwise, you're a huge dork. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Instagram, Roanoke Tales link, and Patreon in the description if you would like to support the channel. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Astronaut tier, we have Army and Kusith. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer, Webitron Supreme, and Commander Balthael. Thank you guys as well. At the Scientist tier, we have Some Big Nerd, Metric System, Invictus Echo, Official Texan, SSJ4 Lotus, and Gina Lane. Thank you guys, and the rest of my patrons. I really do appreciate y'all's support. You're absolute ballers. Also, I am live streaming for members now pretty regularly, so if you want to check that out, I think it's like $2, like $1.99. I can't remember. I gotta have to check. But anyways, if you want to become a member and support the channel, you can do that too. Either way, it's all good. But that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.